Welcome to episode 2 of the ClearVision Hockey Podcast. Today we're going to be discussing a little bit about camps, the kind of camps that are available, and the process for both the organization, the families, and players, kind of when deciding which camps to go to. I'm still joined with my father, hockey executive and general manager of a Tier 3 hockey team, Adam Benaldi. Dad, how's it going?
Oh, great. Looking forward to episode 2. I think the camp landscape is a great subject matter and very, very confusing for, a lot of players and families as they move up the chain here of they get out of youth hockey and start getting invites. It's a very, very tough thing to maneuver through. So I think it's a good subject matter for sure.
Yeah, I agree. And obviously, we've been to a bunch of camps. We have a pretty good experience of what a camp should be or the kind of camp. So I guess we can start with the different kinds of camps. From your
Yeah.
perspective as kind of running them, how do you see them? And then I guess I
Yeah.
can go as a player.
Yeah. And so I think you're going to, as you start moving up the ranks of, what we would call tier hockey, you're going to start getting junior invites. You're going to get what's called exposure camps that can expose you to both teams and schools. But along the way, I think you have to very, very clearly understand your goals as a family and a player, because, maybe without getting too specific, there are developmental camps where you're just working on your skill. There are developmental camps that have exposure. In other words, you're going to be working through skills, and then you're going to be having either junior level coaches and college coaches there. And then you're also going to have just straight what they call ID camps, which is like a tryout, right?
Yep.
And so I guess everything in between. Some have some coaches there, some have a couple coaches, some have just the program coaches. You can, like, for example, you can have like a NCDC invite. You can have a null team. You can have, the more we talk about it, the more we realize there's the combines too, right? That are put on by the league.
Mm-hmm.
And so, just saying that out loud, you can imagine someone who doesn't have that, I guess, knowledge of where to go and what to go. You have to really look at it as family and say, okay, let's just say there's a skill camp that's put on by an NHLer, right? And maybe they're going to have some coaches there, but you also can kind of see if the goal is to see, like on our last podcast, we talked about understanding where you are in the hierarchy, right? And some of these camps can give you a real good pulse for where you fit in the country or North America, as opposed to your local, small town camp, right? That's put on by one of the coaches there. So I think you did the one that's put on by the House back in New York, and I think that was a really good start for seeing what was out there. Like, what was your first instinct of I don't even remember the name of the camp. Selects, yeah. And so that was like an invite camp, but it was, at the end of the day, it was your first exposure to a lot of tier 1 players coming together to play this kind of development and exposure. What was your thoughts on that first experience?
Yeah, so that camp, I think looking back on it now with all the camps, I wish I did kind of understand what I was doing in terms of like a mindset going into each one. But that camp was really good for me because that was like my first real thing besides, I guess, Mitch Korn camp, which was just like a goalie camp. But there, like, it's really helpful to get in, like, know those people. For the most part, as you kind of go up, the same people you're going to be at those camps with are the same people you're going to see at every camp. So number one, it made me feel comfortable at other camps, which is huge. Number two, it showed me kind of where I stack up. And then three, it's honestly just a really good experience. Like, you're doing practices, games. with that camp, there was a selection process for a team to go to, I believe it was Italy, and play like a tournament there. So there was something to kind of strive for. But I think at that age, I was kind of naive to what it was. Looking back at it now, maybe I would have gone about it a different way, but I was young, right? What was I, 13?
Yeah, I was going to say maybe even 12 when you first started.
Yeah. Yeah, but it was a really good first step in kind of meeting a lot of kids, feeling comfortable, kind of getting into the whole hockey world. But I would say that camp was a little bit of a mixture of the two, um, which what you said was great advice, I think. Before you go to these camps, understanding which of the tiers it's under. I would say it goes development, exposure, and maybe there's a couple with both. But just knowing which one it is, so you can kind of prepare and go into it with a good headspace as a player and parent.
Yeah, and I don't think we really did any of that. I mean, I think a lot of these podcasts are going to be, not necessarily expert advice, but more bringing in knowledge and things that we learned along the way. Because, like I said, it's easy for me to say, analyze the camp, understand your goals. What are you trying to accomplish? What are they trying to accomplish? Right? Because another one that you did was a pure goalie developmental camp, right? Which was the Corn camp, super popular goalie camp, but massive numbers, like massive turnout, massive name recognition. For those of you that don't know, Mitch Korn is one of the more recognized goalie coaches, had huge success at all levels, including the NHL. And he puts on a camp and multiple camps actually throughout the year. And the attendance is, what was there, 150 goalies or some
Yeah, there's
radical
a
number?
couple groups. I think he goes like the Saber group or in the Predators group. It might be different now. Might be Islanders and Predators, but he's just got two different groups and just a ton of goalies on the ice and doing off ice and everything like that. But that one I would say, and also experience, right? A lot of these camps you can put into the experience category. So that one was really good for experience and just development, trying to get better.
Yeah, and I think for me as a dad, right, which is a lot of people hopefully listening to this, is the family trying to understand where your child fits in, because like I said, you can be the best of the four goalies in town at your age group, right? But then when you put 150 goalies or 75 if it's broken in, whatever age group, and now you go, okay, let's say for example, you getting goalie of the week at that camp really made me realize, okay, here's a guy who sees something in him beyond the local, whatever team at the time. So I think that's a really good way to go, okay, if your child can separate themselves in some of these camps, because obviously at 12, 13 years old, you're only really trying to get better and maybe see where you fit and have a great experience.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, so.
And when I received that, in no way was like, oh, okay, I'm going to go to the NHL or whatever it
No.
was. It was just what I'm doing is correct, I guess. The trajectory I'm on is going good. Just keep kind of doing what I'm doing. It was a good reassurance
Yeah.
and just kind of cool. But
It's validation, right? I
yeah,
mean,
but
because you're
it's
working
not.
hard and you really only got your dad, and so I mean, there's a little validation, I think.
Yeah.
And once again, understanding, okay, should we take another step? Should we look for another team? Right? It does help you to make decisions, I think.
Mm.
Right?
Yeah.
And so, I would say that's a really good place to start, is understanding, trying to figure out where your child fits in is a really good one, but not focused. I think you said it best. Just because you get goalie of the week at Mitch Korn camp doesn't mean anything 10, 5, 6 years from there, right?
Mm.
It just a little bit of validation, keep it real that this is a wonderful experience. There's a lot of kids with the same dream and you're on a good path, period. and
Mhm.
a path to what? A enjoyable journey,
Yeah,
right? I mean, that's really all it is.
a
So
continuation of your hockey
yeah,
career a
keep
little bit.
playing.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. And so, and again, we go back to the darkness, which we'll be talking about a lot. Even that situation, while you're at that camp, as a family member, I would say you probably didn't care about it, but for me, I am doing the math. I'm in my head going, oh wow, there's 150 goalies here at anywhere from 3 to 600 a person. You start going, okay, I see why they do these things. And if you get caught up in that, then those are the times where people start going, oh, that was just a money grab, or that thing wasn't worth it. He barely talked
Mm.
to Mitch. You could find something wrong with everything you do in this sport,
Yeah.
right?
And
And I
that's
think,
why
go
I
ahead.
think having a good conversation or understand, like, these Instagram pages, every camp has an Instagram page, every camp has websites. Like, you can do so much research, and if your goal is to just go to this camp, get experience, meet some people, then like that should be your goal. If it's to get better, that should be your goal. If it's a camp, like a tryout camp to make the team, then that's your goal. Like, you got to clearly outline. But then if you don't get something that wasn't your goal, like let's say I go to this camp and I didn't get goalie of the week, but even then, like that was more like just a cool thing. I guess let's say it was a USHL camp when you're 15 and like, oh, I didn't make main camp. Um, if your goal was to go against some USHL drafts and take in that experience, learn about coaches, learn about schools, then like that is so in your control. That's completely in your control and something that the coaches at the end of the day can't take away. But if you tell yourself that and then you don't make main camp, you can't get you can't get upset about it. You said I'm going to take this information, and then if you don't get it, you have to say, okay, I got what I wanted from this, use it as a learning tool, and then next year maybe my goal adjusts, right? So it's really understanding why you're there. And I think a really, really good step in those, I guess we can go to the kind of tryout camps because there's a lot that go into that. But a really good first step is to email the coach back and ask them where they saw you play. Um, I think,
Yeah, and so you're segueing into this kind of invite level, right? Okay,
mhm,
I've been invited to a camp. And so what you're trying to determine is, are you part of a mass email, or have they seen you play? And even if you are part of a mass email, how many players do you plan on selecting from this camp?
mhm,
Right? And so you can ask the right questions. Like an ID camp, historically, uh, you know, um, when I was an owner GM of the Las Vegas team, we would do an ID camp with 100% intention of finding, let's say, 5 players at all different positions. Right
mhm.
now, that was just the way we ran camp. You know,
And that was to get into main camp.
correct. Right, and most of those teams, or most of those players would make the team. Unless somebody came out of nowhere, right? And so, but that's not everybody. Some people build these camps and consider them part of their financial model. And I know that happens a lot in the North American League, but it is one of the only ways to get seen outside of they came and watched you. For example, if you're not at the North American showcase, let's say, there's the one in Blaine where everybody goes and you get to try to be seen. And let's just say you don't get seen or you don't get to go to that. So now you have to realize like what I'm trying to ultimately get from the camp now is hopefully get seen. But you may have to realize that there's a lot of teams that have already selected their players.
Mm.
So the especially goalies, for example.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
you know what I mean? You might make it down to how many times did this happen to you? Get down to the final four, go through the all-star game and truly believe you have a chance. And then at the end of the day, well, we already had our goalies.
Yeah, and that comes with experience, right? Like these teams have their goalies and they don't want the All-Star game to suck, so they're going to try to get the rest of the good players and the rest of the good goalies to at least have a decent All-Star game and then from there, they already have their goalies or they have a certain amount of players. Maybe a few can fit in, but at the end of the day, the best players are going to make the All-Star game for the most part, but that's to make the All-Star game as competitive as possible and pick a few extra players that might be filling spots.
Well, and they're going to bring their players in that they already know from either last year or some selections, right? So you get to go against them and maybe you can shine. But the likelihood of making a team from a camp is, it's just not high. But that's okay as long as you have that expectation going in.
Yeah. Yeah. And like
especially
I said,
at the tier, 2 and above level,
yeah.
right?
And if you go into it with the mindset of, I'm going to show my best, there is a possibility, but I won't be upset. Like, I'll talk to the coach, whatever. Like, you want to get as much information from as possible, learn from their coaches, ask questions. As a goalie, that's kind of what I can say. Like, if they have a goalie coach, learn from them, learn their strategies, take what you want to, leave what you don't need, and just get your name out there and meet a ton of people. Like, I've met so many kids at camp, and then you see them at another camp, or maybe you end up playing with them on a junior team. Like, and then makes your whole situation at that new team more comfortable, which makes you play better. So getting those experiences, if you're just going for the experience, is very good. And then there's a lot of times where the coach says, hey, I'm inviting you personally to this camp. You're not going to pay for it. We are seriously looking at you. That's where you prepare for that camp. You do your training. You have the date circled, and you go to that camp trying to just make the team. It's different situations, same camp, same different kids, but there are different situations for different kids in the same camp.
Yeah, and I think I should speak on when I was just a dad, how I felt about that situation compared to building a team. And for example, the team that I'm working with now, we're going to start our recruiting in April. Like, as soon as nationals is over, the recruiting process begins. And you have to sign the existing players that you want from your team. And then you have to go think about the teams you've played, what camps you're going to go. And so all of that, if you have done your homework as a GM and a head coach, you know your team in the 90 percentile.
Yeah.
And I need this to be very clear. Even at the tier 3 level, we know our team. If we have done a good job, you have selected and signed the majority of your team before your camps.
Yes.
But you do leave spots open. So everybody
because
needs
at that
to
level, there's a lot of trickle down, and that's a lot of levels actually. USHL kids down to the NAL down to NCDC down to USP, whatever it is. There are those spots available for when that happens to get your top one guy.
Or, well, I mean, let's be honest, even some camp guys. All I'm saying is you can't afford to just use camp, is my real point. No. I'm not saying, in other words, even goaltenders. The worst thing in the world is you go into camp having no goalies.
Yeah.
That's the flip side of it, right? Mm-hmm. So you think, okay, I'm one of the 4. But if that team waited until that moment to get their goalies and nobody stepped up, they're in huge trouble.
And that might not be a team as a player you want to maybe play for anyway, if that's kind of their approach.
Oh, that's the flip side of it. Yeah. So that's just I think it's important for everybody to look at, because again, we go back to these negative things. Oh, that was just a money grab. It wasn't political. I didn't know anybody. But at the end of the day, maybe there's just good head coaches and good GMs that have been recruiting, because typically the camps are June, July. That's when most of the camps are. But good GMs and good head coaches start April. So they go April, May, and June, trying to find players, looking at film, going back and trying to build their team so that they're not just relying on camp. And that doesn't make them bad people. It doesn't make the whole situation horrible, but it can be perceived that if you go there and you're the best, let's just say you put up 5 points and you're a center, and they don't need a center. You know what I mean? They filled their team. They have 2 returners and they have 2 guys that they found from different, whatever, prep, wherever they found them.
Or drafts. Yeah.
Or drafts. Yeah. Yeah. Especially if you're looking at higher levels. So now when I get to camp, I've done a good job, but that means the best kid from camp would only be a consideration if I don't get those top players. But that kid's going to feel like, what do you mean? I did everything right in his eyes, including yours, right? I remember you being the best goalie at camp and then finding out there were no goalie positions.
Yeah.
And that feels like they took the money, but it just means they did a good job building the team. And so I finally got to see that over the last, let's say 6 years of building teams, is that if you end up waiting till that time, you're not in a good spot.
So let me ask you, as like a GM, if a player were to come up to you or call you after getting a camp invite and asked you a certain amount of questions, like where did you see me play, kind of understanding where they fit in. Number one, how would that, I guess, make you feel as the GM? And then what are some good questions that you would want to receive that you feel like, okay, this player is actually taking this pretty seriously?
Well, you also can question yourself out of the opportunity, right? Almost like you're not willing to come down and show it. So you're riding
Right.
that fine line of,
Yeah.
I'm better than your camp, I'm not coming if you don't answer these questions right. So I think, what are you looking for? What positions have you filled? If you're a goaltender, I think is obviously the subject line. How many goaltenders do you have set right now?
Mm-hmm.
And if the number is 2 or less, you have an opportunity. If it's 3, there's not much there.
Mm-hmm.
If we got 2 returners and we got a guy that we like, we got good at asking those questions, right? And I think sometimes you're going to hear stuff you don't want to hear because you're all set to go to camp. You got the invite, and then throughout from the invite to the time the camp comes, those positions can get filled, and that can be defensemen, right? I mean, each one of the positions, obviously there's the most amount of forward, so there's the most amount of opportunity. If you're a defenseman, there's less opportunity because there's just less defensemen on the team, right? And then you get down to goalie, and maximum, is 4 or 5 goalies, and so that's a pretty small number, and typically it's 3.
Mm-hmm.
So that, I don't think we understood that, because you would go to some of these camps, dominate, go to All-Star game, potentially being down to 2, but it's not really 2. It's maybe none by the time it was done. So that's a hard thing to do, but a lot of the camps are a great experience. You're playing with the best kids. You're seeing kids. You're opening doors. That coach remember you if they get moved up to, let's say, college.
Mm-hmm.
So I think if you focus,
and sometimes there are, like, if you just show good at these camps and you try to just do your best, there are some sneaky other teams' coaches that go to these camps. Not in their attire, but they'll see you and maybe they'll take note. Like, if you really have a good showing, that happens. So it's not like going into these camps and just saying, oh, I didn't make this team. There's no spots. I'm not going to try, whatever. It's just a detriment to your potential of another team. Like, it happens.
Well, and that's the one thing that Mitch Korn taught us. I think one of the things he said every single seminar and every single camp was, you never know who's watching.
And so the story was, he and I believe another scout for the Predators went to watch Rinne play in Finland. And it was like the big decision, what they're going to do with Pekka Rinne. And that game, they find out before the game that Rinne isn't starting. And they don't tell him they're there, obviously. And they just have to watch his warm-ups as a backup. And they said he did everything right. He stretched. He tracked pucks well. He was going through a routine. He didn't take any shot off, even though he was backing up. They said, okay, this kid has pro habits, and he became Pekka Rinne. But that's just, you never know when someone's watching or who it is. So always having those habits, always doing the right things is very, very important.
Well, and even how he got his job. Remember the story with Rick Dudley? He's breaking down film back in the VHS days, and Rick Dudley, who was the coach at the time for the Sabres, walks into the room and just stands in the back and watches him break down film. Didn't even know he was there. So I think that's another good, and probably, there's probably a piece of that for a whole nother time. about your body language and your effort, and you never know who's watching. It's definitely a piece of it. But that,
Mindset
again,
going in.
yeah, and I think stepping it up to, you know, enjoying the process, not being so focused on the result.
Mhm.
If you can say, hey, like one of the things you say all the time is, I visited some of the coolest cities that I never would have seen.
Oh yeah.
Right. I mean, so maybe there's a team you didn't make, or you went down to the end and they said they had goalies. I know some of that was really disappointing, but the experience, when you pull yourself out of the result, sometimes the experience is amazing. I think family members have to remember that too, you know.
But with that said, it's very hard to do in the moment. Like, not
Well,
taken
almost
away, like,
impossible.
yeah.
Yeah.
But if you can't take a step back and say, okay, I was just in Saskatchewan, or I was in Florida if you're from Canada, or I was in LA, or wherever these camps are, if you can take a step back and say, okay, that was cool for what it was. Hockey's given me the opportunity to travel to all these places. I can say I've been here, here, here when I'm done. I know all these people. I have so many new friends. I have so many different ways of coaching, of coaches talking to me. And a lot of coaches come from that. You get so much information. You want to take some pieces. You become a coach. Like, camps, like you said, shouldn't just be, oh, I need to make this team. Oh, I need to make the All-Star game. Blah blah blah. There's so much that go into them, and outlining your goals before you get there is huge. Talking with your parents, talking with the coaches, talking with your current coach to say, hey, what do you think of this camp? Maybe he knows somebody. Maybe you get a little more in. There's just a lot that you can do to make sure your experience isn't just, I need to make this team.
Yeah. And again, there's a lot of negativity. And honestly, like, it is dark sometimes, right? I mean, let's be honest, the carrot dangling world of hockey in general, come here and you'll have an opportunity to play on our X team. You know, and I never want to bag on any specific leagues, but anytime you have a subcategory, whether it be elite to premier or NA3 to null or any subcategory, sometimes those coaches will use that promotion as a way to generate revenue.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And that is a very slippery slope, and it can leave a very negative taste in a player and family's mouth when it comes to just what they were told or slash promised. Right. And so we just have to keep it all in perspective and remember back our first podcast, we talked about the percentage of kids that are going to play high level college hockey, which includes, you know, I mean, geez, ACHA 1 is becoming the equivalent of what D3 used to be, and D3 is having trickle down. And to be able to play at that level, or even have a chance to play at that level, you're going to go through a lot. You know,
Yeah.
you're just going to go through a lot of disappointment. You're going to have to focus on what you got out of it, and less, it's about the result. And the cliche of the joy is in the journey, hockey will serve you tons of that if you let it. Right. And so
let
that,
me ask you, as like a parent and GM now, looking back at, like, if we got all these camps and how to do it again, what would you be looking for when picking which camps my brother and I should try to be going to?
well, one thing for sure is expanding the invite, and be willing to ask some questions about their situation.
Mm.
You know, the invite's very exciting. A lot of times they're good at personalizing the invite.
Sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes. But again, let's just say it has a personal feel. There's a little bit of saw you at districts or saw you here, whatever,
Mm.
you know, but still understanding the opportunity and deciding more about, this would be a great experience, get in front of these coaches and more clearly understand the opportunity. That's something I think I would have done different, especially knowing what I know in putting camps together,
Mm.
or putting teams together, probably more accurately.
Yeah.
So I think that's a very, very big one, because you can still go, but you're just reshaping your expectations.
Right.
You know, if you kick open the door, that's cool, but don't go with the expectation that there's 4 goalie spots available.
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And I think that would have changed how you and I went into these things, maybe enjoying the travel, hopefully creating great relationships with coaches. If that's your goal and just improving, then you almost can't lose.
Right. I think another big thing would be to look at the structure of the camp in terms of practices, games, workout, what maybe you get, like workout gear, how many players are on each team. Let's say they have 5 forward lines, 8D, and every team has 4 goalies on it for a camp. That probably isn't the best camp for you to go to if you want to get seen or any kind of development. You're not going to play that much. It's just a fact.
Well,
So
and yeah, and you're not going to get enough touches to be chosen, which means they're probably just filling numbers and revenue, right?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and yeah, that's kind of tough to hear, right? I mean, there's people out here that have invites or have had invites that went, wait, that exact thing happened to me. I showed up, there was 5 teams, I got, hardly any shifts, I never touched the puck, I had no chance to make the team. And
well, you
so
probably didn't. It's kind of the
yeah,
reality.
but that doesn't have anything to do with skill. And that's what
Right.
families and players need to understand. Sometimes it isn't about your skill. This is a high quality team that's been around for a while. Recruiting for them is very easy.
Mhm.
But also,
And these higher level leagues aren't pay to play, so they have to make money somehow. It's just
right.
like ultimately they have to. It just or these teams won't exist. Like these camps, there's a lot of kids and they can charge a lot of money, and sometimes they have to do that to keep the team going for the year or whatever it is. Like these non-pay to play leagues that are the highest level, they have to generate income, and some of them, maybe the places that don't get a lot of fans, the smaller towns, like that camp, you might want to look into a little bit more. Like, are they trying to get money? Like, how is it? There's a lot of things you have to weigh when trying to make a team. If you're just going in for development and experience, maybe you got a buddy, maybe there's a coach you want to learn from, that's completely different. But if you want to make the team and your goal is to make that team in whatever league, you should look at a lot of factors, including maybe the size and the coaching and how much money their team generates, possibly to see if they need money. There's all things you can look at if you really want to make a team, if you're looking to find a place to play.
Right on. Yeah. And again, I hope people, I know we touched on a lot of pieces of camp, but the summary of this is there are developmental camps where you are working on your skill. In there, you're looking to meet people, you're looking to meet coaches and find out where you stand, period.
Get
There
some
are other,
feedback.
and get some feedback, right? And an experience. There are tryout camps. And depending on where you fit, how you got the invite, where they saw you, some of the cliche stuff is they'll find you. But that's not always true when you play in some small market. So sometimes you do got to get yourself out there and you do have to attend these things to just start kicking doors down.
Mhm.
And so I think that as long as everybody keeps a very clear head and realistic expectations, camps are wonderful. They serve a purpose in this sport, and they serve a purpose for the organization. They serve a purpose for the player. But you have to realize that just because you get invited to a camp doesn't mean that there's even a spot. And if you go into it with that expectation, but if there's a spot, I'm gonna pound the door down. And that's a great, that's just a great way to go at it.
Yeah.
And so I hope everybody listening, at least pauses before they jump in and sign, or they feel like it's more than it is. It really does come down to going to camps and meeting new kids and meeting new coaches can be one of the coolest things if you allow it to be. And it's all about the approach is really I think the message here.
Yeah. Like I have kids I play my college team with that I went to a camp with or saw at this training camp or even saw at a goalie camp or whatever it is. Like you make friends and they'll end up being on your team. There's a lot that can come from camps. I don't think kids should be going to as many as they are currently. Um, Maybe pick a few in the summer and focus on some training to maximize each one would probably be my last piece of advice for that.
Well, let me pause that for 1 second. And I think what you're saying there is, let's just say that between airfare, hotel, and camp fee, you literally could get a personal trainer to improve your skating for a week. If you're, let's say, a forward or a defenseman, you could find a local pro or high level coach that could improve your game, that's going to open more doors than just going to the camp for the sake of going to the camp, I think is what you're saying.
Yeah, and just getting beat down mentally. If you're just going to a bunch of camps, I'm taking every invite I get. Like, oh, I didn't make it. I didn't make it. I didn't make it. Like that, as opposed to working towards a specific camp, having all the clear expectations from the coach, having those conversations, and then putting that money into getting better, time and money into getting better for the camp that you believe you have the best chance of going to, is going to serve you much more than going to 7 camps in the summer and feeling like your season never ended and getting beat down. And then you'll probably end up playing in the place you thought you were going to play in from the beginning. Like it just ends up being more you're taking on mentally. And as you get older, it all kind of adds up. And then you look back like, oh man, that summer was crazy. Wish I kind of would have gone about it a different way.
Yeah.
So,
And here's one more piece of advice to the parents out there. Set a budget for camps every off season. You know what I mean? Like whatever it is, whatever you can afford, we are going to go to one developmental camp, training, cool camp for our skill and our position. And then we're going to go to maybe 2 invites, you know, if you have the means. Because I think when you get over that, it starts to get a little where you start to resent the game, the teams, the situation. Because
and there's a possibility that that last camp was the one you had the best chance at, but you burnt yourself out 4 other camps ago, and that one slip by. Like you gotta know which ones are the best, what you're doing to maximize the opportunity from each one.
Yep. And the bottom line, that's where and why this ClearVision Hockey, both podcasts and business model, is meant to help people through that journey. So we look forward to video evaluation of different players. We look forward to giving advice, and that's what we want to be here for, is to help to evaluate these camps, help to evaluate the player and make sure that they're going to the ones that fit their skill set based on the years of our experience and our coaching staff and everyone. So we see a
and
need.
I got the Instagram account going, ClearVision_hockey. If you guys have any questions or anything like that, you can shoot us a DM on there. We can answer those. And like my dad said, we're here to help and make this process a little easier, and hopefully get you in the best position, make you the best athlete, best person to make these teams and beyond. So I think we have a good start here, and hopefully next episode we can get a special guest on,
Or
maybe
2.
even or 2. That would be nice. We'll see. I think this was a good start, and there's a lot of good advice in here. I appreciate it.
Yep. Sounds good. It was great. And I think, like I said, he's right. Reach out. Part of the process is just reaching out to people who feel lost, hearing from them. And we look forward to having those conversations. So great episode. Look forward to number 3. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks, guys.